A very good afternoon to everyone present in this webinar. I am Pranjali from 4th year, College of
Pranjali,
Architecture, SVIT Vasad.
Pranjali, I think Punita madam has left. Yeah, she's there.
No, sir, she
Okay, you
is
can
there.
start. You can start.
I cordially welcome our speaker for the day, Professor Punita Mehta. I also extend a heartiest welcome to all the fellow attendees in this webinar. Our college has come up with various webinar series during this COVID-19 pandemic on diverse topics like landscape architecture, conservation architecture, GIS, products in furniture design, alumni series, and now we are here with two new webinar series, Essence of Architecture and Architecture Education. Today, we have fourth part of Architecture Education by Professor Punita Mehta, who will be sharing insights on Foundation Program in Architecture. I request Professor Sailesh Nair, Principal College of Architecture, to address this webinar.
Good afternoon, one and all. I'm today very happy to invite Professor Punita Mehta, who has been an exemplary dedicated faculty of MSU, who has also been my faculty when I was studying in MSU. Welcome, madam, to this forum. And
Thank you.
I'm sure that today it will be very interesting and enlightening presentation by Punita madam. So I request Taha to please continue with the session. Pranjali, continue with the introduction.
Yes, sir. I request Professor Taha Padrawala to give us a glimpse of our college. Hello, Taha, sir.
Hello.
Thank you, Taha, sir. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Professor Punita Mehta. Ma'am is a Vadodara-based architect, professionally working independently since 2007 with NGOs and is largely focused on institutional buildings. She has also worked with Studio Jaimini Mehta from 1980 to 2000 as a senior architect. Since 21 years, she has constantly devoted herself into architectural discourse, accomplishing bachelor's degree from SEPT University and master's from University of Canberra, Australia, and also teaching assistant at the same university while she was pursuing her master's. She is dedicatedly involved with professionals as well as academic world, She's associated with Department of Architecture, MS University, now for many years. She has developed a foundation course for first year and has conducted workshops at various institutions imparting architecture education in India. The concept of foundation program isn't new. It started a century ago as a new and revolutionary curriculum at the Bauhaus, and the impact of which on the architecture and other art disciplines can be seen even today. National Institute of Design Ahmedabad was the first one to adopt this as common preparation ground for the first year students. One cannot discount the pedagogy of the Bauhaus. It was a reflection of spirit of that time. But when we examine it today, it has certain gaps. It is the need of time that the schools of architecture rethink the pedagogy and the foundation programs they have adopted and have almost been taken for granted. A pedagogy reflecting spirit of time. It is my sheer pleasure and absolute honor to welcome Professor Punita Mehta to this virtual platform. The dais is yours, ma'am.
Thank you, Sailesh. Actually, I think I'm speaking to you in person, so to speak, virtually, of course, though. First time since you've become a principal, so let me first congratulate you on becoming the principal. As you rightly
Thank you,
said,
madam.
yes, I
Thank
taught
you,
you
madam.
in I took a housing studio for a
Yeah,
semester,
yeah.
if you remember correctly.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Yes. So you can see now that you are a principal of a college, you can see I've been around for a very long time. It just shows. But it has been a very pleasant journey, no doubt. So I thank SVIT for giving me this platform to share some of my ideas on the foundation program in architecture. So I think without much ado, I shall begin and start the thing. Just a minute, it'll just come. What happened? Share. Okay. Can you see my
Yeah.
screen now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
and now
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
doing the whole screen. So let me begin. So good evening, everyone. Today I will be talking about the foundation program in architecture. This presentation is actually basically in two parts. The first part, I will be talking about the genesis of this program. And in the second part, I will be presenting examples from the foundation program that I have initiated and implemented over several years, first in Goa and then later on in MSU. So there are examples that I can show you of what I have done. So as rightly pointed out in the short introduction, it began at Bauhaus. Everybody recognizes this building and is also familiar with the pedagogy up to some extent. And in 1919, so it is almost a century ago, actually, the foundation program was implemented in 2020 fall. So it is exactly 100 years ago that it happened. Before we go into the foundation program, let us just quickly have a look at what the whole entire curriculum was like of the Bauhaus. So first, of course, it was a holistic nature of education. And it began with the mission to reform art, design, and society. At that time, it was a revolutionary one. It departed greatly from the previously practice of the Beaux-Arts. Starting from zero is also one of the proverbial maxims of Bauhaus pedagogy, which means they are ahistorical. So they are starting fresh and rejecting what all had happened previously. Its orientation as a whole was also towards technology and industry. And the idea was to abolish the distinction between artist, craftsperson, and craftsperson by recognizing the knowledge and skills which are common to both. And from that comes this philosophy, a Gesamtkunstwerk. That is their philosophy, which means a total work of art, which is combining the artist, the craftsperson, the theory and practice, and creating a total work of art. One of its aims was also to foster links between the school and the industry, which is their a social outlook that we just don't do something in the school, but we also see to it that it reaches the people. And the school is the servant of the workshop, which is what was written in the manifesto. And this shows the emphasis on the hands-on process of design. Actually, this workshop, the whole idea of the workshop has come from the Bauhaus. And if we see its influence, for example, when I joined SEPT, we had this subject called workshop, and many schools probably still have it. MSU also had that subject. So this comes from the Bauhaus also. So if you look at the diagram, it's a circular diagram that shows you the holistic nature of this course. The outer ring, which was initially for 1 semester, which is half a year, but later on was expanded to 1 year, was the basic course, or what they call the war course, and which had the elementary study of form, study of materials in the basic workshop. Then, of course, there's another ring which shows space study, material, nature, materials and tools, and construction and representation, etc., where they learned drawing and everything. And then finally, they took up one material and worked with one master. So all the teachers were called masters, who were very good or had reached a certain level of expertise in their chosen field. And then at the center, you have the Bau, which is the building, which is where everything was heading towards. So it was supposed to be the primary or the most important discipline. And we will now jump quickly into the preliminary course, because that is our focus in this presentation. And this preliminary course happened over 3 different places, and over a period of time had 3 different instructors or directors. At Weimar, you had Johannes Itten. At Dessau, you had Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, and again in Dessau, later on, you had Josef Albers. These 3 different people had different emphasis, had a different direction, had a different take on what this program should be. And you can, and it has to be presented separately. We will go very quickly, of course, not much in detail. So if you look at his Johannes Itten, he was actually the first program instructor, and he actually initiated this program. So when he joined Bauhaus in 1919, he came up with this suggestion that let us have a preliminary course, because the students that they had got were from very diverse backgrounds, ages, creative faculties, gender, etc. And to kind of bring them on a common platform and also to gauge their potential, he suggested that we do this, and he was given the go-ahead. So he's the first one. Now, he was a Swiss artist, but he had also been teaching in the kindergarten, and he was greatly influenced by Friedrich Froebel, who, if you know, is actually the one who has started the kindergarten system and is known for his Froebelian blocks, or gifts as they are called, which is learning by doing, experimentation for its own sake, and within the element of play. Now, Itten was basically very monastic, very spiritual. So he used to get his students, as you can see in this photograph, to do all kinds of body exercises. He believed in body movement and rhythm, because that was one of his one aspects of his theoretical framework for pedagogy. And he gave lots of exercises which dealt with systematic analysis of color, form, and investigation of dark and light contrast. In fact, he developed the general theory of contrasts. His examples of his exercises dealt with compositions, form division of the square, proportional studies, matter studies using different materials at hand. And we can see the examples here of his exercises, this form division of the square. Then you can see this material study on the top right-hand corner, which is students collected whichever material was at hand and created assemblages like this, with nothing which was rigid or well defined. You know, it was very loosely structured. Then on the lower right, you can see an exercise exploring light-dark contrasts. Again, in the middle, you can see on the lower one, talking about contrast as well as materials. You can see transparent material, etc. So these were the kind of exercises that he did. He was found to be too not really fitting into the original idea of Bauhaus, and so he was removed and replaced by Moholy-Nagy in 1923. He was a Hungarian artist. And so this removal of Itten actually effectively marked the end of the school's expressionist leanings, and it got it closer to its original aim, which was as a school of design and industrial integration. So his pedagogy was emphatically rational. You see, he believed in a rational design, and so he created a stronger orientation within the school towards technology and industries. He also made great effort to terminologically distinguish the concrete manifestations of different materials and to define them more precisely, and towards systemization and rational penetration of sensual elementary experiences. And also he was, you can see him, he's in overalls, so he greatly believed in working in the workshop. So his emphasis was on being on the practical. And these are some examples of his exercises using different materials in their pristine forms, showing balance, for example. So this is the kind of more rationally oriented compared to Itten. Itten believed in sort of releasing the creative energy of the student. Initially, the third instructor of the preliminary course, Joseph Albers, was a co-instructor with Moholy-Nagy, and he originally joined as a student, but he was drafted to become one of the instructors before he finished his course. And his educational concept can be summed up as learning by experience. And he had two working concepts, basically. One is matter exercises and material exercises. In fact, material studies was his original contribution to the Bauhaus. And this involved many exercises where paper was cut and folded, paper and cardboard. But his purpose was not about sensual experience of the material, but about testing the inherent properties such as stability, load-bearing capacity, strength, etc. And he also had a lot of tactile exercises to study texture. So these are some of his examples. Paper folding and cutting and folding, many schools I still see do these kind of exercises, and of course the genesis is with the Bauhaus. And then on the top right you can see some exercises that explore texture. Now the teaching philosophy. Oops. I don't know what has happened. Anyhow, so it can be either student-centric, society, or if you see in this triangle, or I don't know why you can't see this, but on the lower right is discipline. And so Moholy-Nagy was oriented more towards student. Walter Gropius, of course, was oriented towards society, and Joseph Albers and the Moholy-Nagy, Itten was towards student, was towards discipline. So it can be either student-centric, which is personal growth and self-actualization, which Friedrich Froebel and Johannes Itten followed, and of course Johannes Itten was influenced by Friedrich Froebel. Or it could be discipline-centered, which was Moholy-Nagy and Joseph Albers, where you say it is art for art's sake. Or it could be society-centered, which is socially engaged art, which was what Walter Gropius, the founding father, had proposed. But of course he was not in charge of the preliminary program. Why is it? Finally, sorry. Okay. So while many of these Bauhaus ideas became the foundation of our architectural pedagogy, what has happened is that the adoption of these ideas has reduced a complex and comprehensive phenomena to something very, very simple, like a simple formula, and which was also visible in architecture then and a lot of architecture today. And then irony is that of the Bauhaus legacy is that many of us are only echoing the elements and principles or universal principles of design or Johannes Itten's theory of contrasts, and ignoring the fact that it was intended to be an integrated curriculum, you see, and negating this responsibility to the broader social context that the original Bauhaus espoused. And below here, you can see the photograph of Joseph Albers He's bending down and touching a model, and he's surrounded by his students. You can see all the work. This is his material study in paper, where you cut and fold. You're not allowed to glue anything. And they're all standing around and discussing and looking at every student's work. And in this next slide, you can see this is a photograph of my studio, and nothing much has changed in the sense that, yes, everybody's gathered around looking at, but what is being said? What is the emphasis of the exercise? That has changed. So now that we are 100 years down the line, what we need is a curriculum that actually echoes the spirit of our time, as Bauhaus echoed the spirit of its time. And it needs to be responsive to the dynamic and emergent conditions, which are the requirements of our culture. So while the objective elements like line, shape, plane, volume, and universal principles of design like unity, emphasis, balance, rhythm, scale, proportions, etc., see, these might be relevant to studio practice, but they don't provide a foundation in these skills, and which are essential to our world, which is a shared and interconnected world. So rather than being a static descriptor of formal relationships, a truly contemporary foundation program should actually cultivate active processes and be rooted in context. So if you look at the Bauhaus legacy, it was a top-down teaching model, which was master-oriented, while the new pedagogy is actually about bottoms-up or participatory, where the teacher is seen as a guide. Bauhaus was, of course, emphasized context-free design, and now what we need is a context-driven. Context, I mean both physical and cultural. Then Bauhaus legacy gave us passive acceptance of ideas, but what we need is active questioning. The Bauhaus is, of course, static elements and principles. We need dynamic elements and principles. Earlier, there was emphasis on simplicity and clarity of design. What we should emphasize, of course, is formal or accept actually formal and conceptual complexity. Because it was, of course, born in Europe and then transported to the US. It had a Western focus and essentially was ahistorical. I mean, they rejected history, Bauhaus, we know that. But for us, what we need to explore is a range of historical and cultural sources. It was very discipline-centric, but the new pedagogy can be student and community-centric. The Bauhaus was emphasized subjective response, and the new pedagogy will have subjective and response, but also objective analysis. It also earlier said unexamined universal meanings were accepted by. That is what Bauhaus legacy has given us. But we need to scrutinize local meanings and judgments. It was a single discipline. Obviously, this will be interdisciplinary in scope. Bauhaus emphasized skill. The new pedagogy will emphasize idea. It is not to say that skills are not important, but to say that ideas take precedence. So you don't have skill for the sake of having a skill, but it is rooted in the ideas and what you want to convey. Bauhaus had the personal expression was important. And here, of course, other viewpoints should be considered. Individual intelligence, collective intelligence in the new pedagogy. This was a unimodal with a single approach, and this will be multimodal with an ability to adjust or change course as and when required. The emphasis here in Bauhaus was on singular point of view, and here it is negotiation and relationships, because nothing is static or constant. Oops. I don't know why we can't see the other points. I'll just put all the points. Okay. So there was a single right answer. But in the new pedagogy, there will be multiple contingent possibilities. So it is not one thing. Bauhaus, of course, emphasized on the abstract. So all the exercises that they did were in the abstract and not within any context. Here, of course, the emphasis is on experiential and sensual. Environment, ecology were completely ignored, but in the new pedagogy, they will be taken into consideration. And here, of course, finally, the point, line, plane, and volume were the elements, while in the new pedagogy, space is the primary element that we are going to explore. So from now on, I'm presenting my program, the Pedagogical Foundation for Architecture. That is divided into two parts. The first part, I will talk about how to introduce design to first-year students. And in the second part, how other subjects are integrated into design, because design is the main subject and the others feed into it. This is a very nice quotation that I have. And it says, which is Heidegger says, that teaching is more difficult than learning. Not because the teacher must have a larger store of information and have it always ready. Teaching is more difficult because what it calls for is this. And this is what I have put in red, is going to be one of the drivers of this new pedagogy, and that is to let learn. So the real teacher, in fact, lets nothing else be learned than learning. Now, the objectives of the program, I have put them in two parts with a green line in between. So the four objectives above the green line were also true for Bauhaus. And the ones which are below the green line, Bauhaus did not incorporate. I mean, they didn't have these objectives. They were not a part of their program. So the first objective is to introduce students to a holistic approach to design. Then to equip the students with the necessary knowledge and skills, of course, of design. Then to develop an ability for self-critique, which is very important, and to arouse and nurture the students' creative faculty. All of these things were true for Bauhaus also. Of course, the way they went about it was very different. But on the lower part, you can see is what I've added, sensitize and enrich visual. So they did talk about visual, but I'm stressing the spatial perception, very important. Develop an awareness of the environment, and of course, to relate it to real life situations means it is context driven, not context free, the way Bauhaus was. And then to achieve the Bauhaus, of course, emphasized the rational and logical, but I think there is a place for the emotional and intuitive as well. So there can be a balance between the two. And then lastly, enhance values in humanities and ecology and environment. Now, the last one I have put in red because this I have not dealt with in my foundation program. And the reason is this, that this foundation program I have introduced in an already existing framework. So there is already a curriculum with separate subject heads, with separate syllabi and teachers and assessment methods, etc. It was not a freshly written program as a foundation program. So obviously there was no humanities or ecology in first year. These subjects didn't exist, and so I couldn't introduce it in a formal way. But of course, this is a work in progress. So if given a chance, of course, this can be put into practice. Now, what was the process, the method or the process or the action plan to achieve this objectives? One is, of course, holistically, when you say holistic, that was achieved by integrating all the subjects. And the integration of all the subjects was by linking the exercises in each module. So you carried the exercise from one subject to another, even if the subject heads remained separate. The process was also more important than the end product here, because the idea was to cultivate design thinking. That was important. Only basic instructions were given for all exercises with very minimal intervention from the faculty. So when they were doing something, the teachers are not telling them do this, do this, do this all the time, because they were given, for every exercise, they were given a write-up before that, which the students read up and it was discussed. So the teachers are like guides and the students are left to explore, discover, and realize. This is very important because, like I told you the quote before, that you have to let students learn. That is very important. Then, of course, the emphasis on and encouraged to do better through self-critiquing. This meant that we allowed them to voluntarily redo their exercises as many times as they wished, right till the end of the semester. Each time they did something, if it was found to be better than before, we modified their grades as well. And the first exercise was allowed to be redone till the end of the semester. Obviously, other exercises were on schedule, so they put in extra work. The idea was to lift up the students to some level where they have achieved, what the exercises was aiming for. And therefore, actually, nobody failed in this first year, and that was not the idea at all. Unless, of course, they were just not doing work or not coming to class. And the key element in this entire learning process is questioning and discussing, which happened at the end of the studio, which you saw in the picture that I had put up, that it is very similar to the one photograph of Joseph Albers. But even if the photographs look very similar, it is what is being talked about, what is being discussed, what is being emphasized. That is the key. So even if the same exercise is done by two different people, it can be two different things. So that discussion is the key, actually. Then, of course, they acquired necessary skills and understanding of different materials and media, but that was within the context of the exercise and not for the sake of it. For example, I have known that in MSU, they used to have a lot of exercises where they do a lot of circles and squares and straight lines, which was to sort of loosen up the body. Actually, Ethan used to do that a lot. He used to make them do rhythmic exercises of the body, and then he would make large marks on the paper with a certain body movement and then ask his students to repeat that. But I think that you can acquire skills, but not for their own sake. It's not necessary that you acquire the skills first and then you use it. What happens is that within the context of any exercise, depending on what media you ask them to use, as they go along, certainly they acquire skills. But it has a certain purpose, it is meaningful, not doing something for its own sake. And then the exercises are certainly structured, but the process is not rigid. That's important. It doesn't have to follow a linear process and begin at one point and end in a certain way, following all stages. The focus also was on the essence of the objects or experience, what I call the ness of things, like the poleness of the pole or things like that, which is very, very important because this is what you're aiming for. When I was reading Alvaro Siza and I was looking at one of the churches that he designed, and he had written somewhere that what he was designing the church, his first act was actually to try and define the churchness of the church, because once you define that sort of becomes the basis of design. And all exercises, mostly the students did work in 3-dimension directly. Sometimes it was the other way around, but mostly in 3-dimension. So the program structure is like this, that you have design in the center with technical drawings, material construction, and basic design, feeding into design, and both sort of with a reciprocal relationship. Of course, ideally humanities and ecology environment should also be a part of this, but it was not there in the framework. So for the time being, it's not in this structure. And then on the right-hand side, you can see all these modules. There are 5. And each of these modules you can see is actually linked to all these subjects. So you have the same module in 2 different subjects, and yet the kind of exercises that are given and what is talked about and what the emphasis that changes according to the subject or appropriateness to the subject. So if you look at the semester program, you can see space module. In this semester program, the upper half is the first semester. And you can see there were many small exercises in the first semester. And in the lower half is the second semester. So there were larger and fewer exercises. So fewer exercises over a longer duration. On the first semester, there are more exercises over a shorter duration. And for example, in design, when you are doing space as an element, That same module is also taken up in basic design, but it is handled differently. It is talked about in technical drawings too, in materials and construction as well. But how you talk about it is different. But the models which you do in design can be carried forward to technical drawing or materials and construction. And this is how the linking happens. As of now, because each subject is like a silo with its own boundaries, what happens is that you leave the making of the connection to the student. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But here there is a conscious effort to see that this linking actually takes place. One of the other key factors which I have not mentioned here is that it requires team teaching. That means you require common teachers, ideally in all the subjects. Of course, it was not possible all the time. So I was not a teacher in all the subjects at any semester. So sometimes I did design and basic design. Sometimes I taught design and technical drawing, or sometimes design and materials and construction. And depending on the scope or the opportunity, the semester where I was doing two subjects together, I tried to link them. And this is an example of how the exercise is written out, you see. And you can see it is in three main parts. The first part is the objective. So the students understand why they are doing something. In the second half, there is a what to do, very simply put. It's very, very simple and direct, or what to do or what not to do. And it tells you step by step, do this, do this, do this. And finally is the last part where there are several questions listed down, which are called class discussion. So these are questions for class discussion. And this really tells the student the focus or the emphasis or what they should really be looking at or looking for when they are doing this exercise. Okay, so what to do is take a wall, cut it and stick it. But why they are doing this, they get a very good idea. And then in this class discussion, of course, they can also add their own questions, which they can bring into the class when they come to class, of course. So the students actually go about doing their exercise and with this write-up, which they read and we discuss before they begin. And the teacher is not telling them what is to be done because they have to figure it out. So doing, reflecting, and they're doing, that is how they go about. So the reflection on what they had done earlier revealed the implications of their actions and clarified the objective through open class discussions. Now, each of these exercises was also followed by a presentation by the faculty, but only at the end. So in this presentation, connection between the ongoing work in the class and architectural practice was established. Also, real life examples were brought to the class also by the students. So this is trying to link with real life situations or actual practice, so examples of what other architects have done in the past. That can be brought to class to showcase what they're doing actually in the class, what is the focus. So this is about the structure, and now we come to the introducing design, how we do it. And the first module that they do is, which I call the bridge exercise, is abstraction and representation, which is something concrete you have to abstract. And in this exercise, what they do is that they are taken to some place, let's say like a pole, or here in this case, the university campus. They move around the university campus. They are not allowed to take photographs or sketch or record or anything. Just experience the place and observe everything, including the people, the activity, buildings and trees and whatever it is, everything. Once they have gone around the university campus, they come back to class, and then you can see they are using different media in a particular sequence. So collage, ink, color, and pencil. They represent their experience of the spatial experience of the MSU campus. And after they have done that, there is a reason why in this particular sequence, I won't go into the detail, is they have to sum up their experience in a phrase or a word like unity in diversity or tradition or natural and man-made, and then express this through a model But this model also had fixed materials. There was thermocol for solid, paper for planes, and they are not told this, of course, but this is the potential, and then a wire mesh. And they use this material in a particular way to express these ideas, and they are talking about the appropriateness or the suitability of what they want to express and the potential and constraints of the material at hand. The next module is space, and in this, of course, they are exploring space making elements and of course the degree of enclosure. So the first exercise is, by the way, when they start the space module, the exercises in space module, they start their models to scale. So the first lecture is very small lecture, about 10-15 minutes or maximum half an hour, to explain what scale means. They understand it. I think there is no problem. So once they've understood what is this 1:50 or 1:100, and they are given this mound board, which is 50 centimeter by 50 centimeter. This size is because that is what is available. This is the short side, so you cut a square out of the mound board, and that at 1:50 scale, it's 25 by 25 meters. So this space, then they subdivide, creating different spaces with having different degrees of enclosure, and then leaving a gap. Of course, they are told leave a gap, don't touch the walls, leave a gap of 1 meter, so you can move around. So movement, and how do you go from here to here, and what is the experience you might have, what variety of spaces there is, and how that experience can be rich. They have already drawn a grid, a 1 meter by 1 meter, that is 2 centimeter by 2 centimeter grid, and this is to help them so that they don't have to use the scale all the time. But of course, they don't have to follow the grid, so they can put it at an angle or curve, or what you can see in different models. And they don't make any drawing. They make straight away the model. They are, by the way, given 3 wall heights, 3 meters, 1.5 meters, and 75 centimeters. And they use a combination of these 3 different heights of walls at different distances to create these different degrees of enclosure and experiences. Then the next exercise is using different materials, that is opaque, translucent, and transparent, but the height is 3 meters only. Again, exploring the same thing, degrees of enclosure and experience, but different. One of the most important, I have to point this out, is that one of the observations which came from a student actually, and she said, that when she did the second exercise, she says it has something to do with the first one, and in that the transparent wall actually reminded her of the 0.75 centimeter wall, because it allows you to see everything, but you can't go anywhere because it blocks your movement. The 1.5 centimeter wall is like just at eye level, so you can see something but not everything, which is like the translucent wall. And of course, the opaque wall is opaque wall, which is the 3 meter wall, which is the same as in previous exercises. So some of these insights are actually, I would say, quite exciting, revealing, I would say. Also talked about can go but can see but can't go, that kind of thing, and can go but can't see. This exercise, they introduced openings, different kinds, say shape and size, actually, to understand that once you puncture a wall, it allows you to see somewhere. And then they also punctured a wall with a door, rather than keeping gaps between walls, to understand what is the difference between a door and a gap between 2 walls, and what it does to the sense of enclosure and experience, how it allows you to see and what you can see, how much you can see, at what level is the opening, etc. So explored that. And then in this, of course, with roofs, columns, and openings, so we have introduced roofs and columns here, but all the other aspects of the previous exercise continue. So those, you can still have different materials, different heights, etc. And then you add this. Only 40% was supposed to be covered. So here again, then we talk about what difference does it do to the enclosure when you put a roof and when you have columns, a series of columns, and when you have columns and walls as composition, what kind of spaces are created. sense of inside, outside, etc. And then finally, they also given ground and plinth. So we are introducing staircases and ramps, staircase, steps, and ramps. This is all to scale. And of course, all other things. So the purpose of the exercise is the same, but the elements that it gets more and more complex. And then you also have a first floor here, which they can put. So the heights were all the same, but they realized, of course, at 1.5 you can't put a roof because you can't go underneath it. So automatically understood that, but you could have a plinth at 1.5. This is what they understand. And then at the end of the semester, they did a house. And this is the first time when actually the functions are brought in. There is no context yet. And it is basically a tube house. So you've given two parallel walls, the length, the width, and the height. And within, they had to articulate that volume and create a residence for themselves. So you can see they're playing with the section. And again, as you can see the preliminary model, and they are making models only. They are making models straight away. By now, they are very good at it. They understand scale. They are not afraid to cut and stick. But here, of course, there is the thickness to the walls, and all those things are brought in because they have gone far in their construction class as well. So that learning also can be brought into this. We will see later on in the construction subject. And this is the second semester. So in the second semester, the first bridge exercise is context and scale. So this is the first time that context is introduced. But the exercise that they do is, before it comes into the main studio exercise, is very, very different. And this is an exercise which the Go students in Goa did. And their context, of course, was the beach. So initially, they had to understand the essence of the beach, or the beachness of the beach, and what constitutes the beach and what makes the beach what it is. And they talked about the vastness and the scale and the moving water and breeze and sunlight and sound of the water and all those kinds of things. And the idea was to make an installation that would engage with all these elements that make the beach what it is. So you can see models with something fluttering and in the wind and floating on the water and shining in the sun and those kind of things. They did exploratory models like this. And finally, they did this actual installation on the beach in groups. And the aspect of scale was also there, because the beach has a particular scale. And so what size should the installation be, so that it has a presence. And it was a real life situation. So there were lots of people around, and you can see there were many interesting ways in which the people actually engaged with these installations. You can see this man here on the lower right corner, sitting in the shadow. And this exercise here in Baroda, we have this banyan tree very close by. So we took that as a setting or as a context. They understood this banyan tree. Of course, they could not make model. That is not possible. So what they did was their ideas, they sketched first. So they went to the banyan tree, sat in different places and sketched how it looks and how it feels. And then they looked at the ground and the leaves on the ground, everything. I mean, that setting, they must understand totally how the light filters in through the leaves, etc. And then after making the sketches in black and white and color, they actually did the installation. You can see they're actually imitating, by hanging these threads, they're imitating the roots of the banyan tree that come and then create a sense of place or a space there. This I will skip. So that was the first design project in the second semester. And then the second design, that was the bridge exercise. And the first design project was a Hangout Space. And this is the first context-driven exercise where all the learnings from the first semester are brought in with function and context. And this is our campus. Everybody, I think most of you are familiar with it. So we have the old DN hall, and then we have the new DN hall. Both are in a different geometry, juxtaposed together. And the new building actually was plonked in the middle of an open space that fragmented it. And students use these different parts. They're separate, but of course connected, and they use different parts in different ways. And they had to create a hangout space for themselves. So the function was They do volleyball court. We have a water body. There is a canteen extension to the basic design studio. This exercise, actually, we also talked about geometry, because the way the new building and the old building are, the way they are oriented is very different. They have different geometries, and create another one. So whether you should respect that or counter that or what. So this person said, no, I acknowledge the geometry, and that is the basis of design. While this other example shows that no, that the intervention can have another identity of its own with curves and something completely different that sort of integrates the old and the new. And the second design project, there were two in the second semester, was a house design. And this is in a context on the Mahi River. But here the process was very different. So they actually had to have an initial idea. And that idea came from, this was a house for a computer professional. So they had to begin with a word or a phrase, that embodies the idea on which the design will be based. So this student said that, okay, the concept will be connections, because that is what the computer professional does. And then you have this idea which you represent two-dimensionally, graphically, and then through a three-dimensional model, which is not the design and it is not to scale. And then you take that model and then you further develop it. Only models, no drawings are allowed. So you can see the several, it is keeping the essence of the earlier model, but of course, slowly going through changes, and now it is getting slowly to scale, and you can see some openings and plinths and things like that in the preliminary and pre-final models. There is a basement which has been added here, you can see, with a light for the basement, and then you are adding all the functions, what goes where. And then this is the final model. So they did the final model, and after that, they made these final drawings. So what that actually, I mean, some may say this is too form driven, but, and of course there were certain projects which had funky or very different, but what if they had actually made the plan, plan making, what most people do, and then extruding it, they would never have been able to achieve this kind of this kind of design, because because you're thinking in 2-dimension. This is thinking in 3-dimension completely. So you have an idea of how all these different spaces are connected and what kind of spaces are formed. And all the learnings from the first semester also, you can see how to place the openings, etc. And of course, they're very good at making models. You can see the quality. And here, of course, there is the thickness of the wall, and there is some idea or understanding of the structure as well. And of course, the functions. And then the last part of this presentation is about integrating the other 3 subjects with design. And we will begin with basic design. Here again, we bring the same module. This is what I was saying, that you have the same module across different subjects, but you do it differently. So here, abstraction and representation, what we did was that, that instead of a place, which was what we did in the first semester, you can actually represent an image, movie, or text. But the idea is to actually look beyond the obvious. Okay, read between the lines. Try to see what is the idea or the message which is hidden in it, and then represent that. So for example, we showed them the movie Modern Times, for the simple reason that it doesn't have a language. So even if they don't know English, they can watch. It's very funny, so it engages the student, but it has a very serious message to convey and many sub-themes as well. So after the movie, the themes, the main theme and the sub-themes are discussed, and which scene shows what and how, etc. And after that, they for themselves they define what is the main theme, and you can see that on the upper right, you can see these are 3-dimensional posters, as I call it, or installations you may call it. And on the lower left, you can see they are 2-dimensional actual posters, which the Goa students did. They could do it in black and white or color, but these are black and white. I would especially like to discuss this, the uppermost. You can see that the student has identified the theme as machines overtaking man, or man being is subjugated, is secondary to the machine. And so you can see that the machine parts are completely out of scale, very large. the gears, the spanners, etc. And the human being is enclosed, and the human being is done with a wire mesh, is almost insignificant or I would say transparent. So this is again learning how to use different materials with a different purpose. So they are understanding the potentials of the material and then using them appropriately to convey something. Or you represent text. This I gave Thin Cities by Italo Calvino, or The Castle by Franz Kafka. This was a one-day exercise. So the poster was a longer exercise. You can have one-day exercises. So this was in clay because they can use it very quickly, read the text, and then represent what they have understood of that text through these clay models. And then you have space module again in basic design. But here they are learning carved spaces. So they are carving these, this POP cube, which is a 20 by 20 by 20 centimeters. Understanding what is the nature of these spaces when you remove material, what is a vertical surface, horizontal surface, is it the same as in others, how to bring in light, how to create different scales within it. Also understanding once you remove the material, of course, you can't put it back. So what is solid? So you're kind of creating an empty space where actually nothing exists, and what that is. And then they had to imagine themselves to be in any one place within the carved space, and then sketch it, imagining themselves within it, using, of course, charcoal or pencil, but only black and white, no color. Here again, you can see they are developing skills of how to use the pencil and the charcoal. Pretty good at it. If you were in Bauhaus, you would just probably use the pencil to create different shades of gray in different squares. But here you do it so that you want to convey something. You want to convey the softness of the surface, all that kind of thing. And how do you use that medium to do it? Then they did built-up spaces, which was a volume given, 130 by 30, which they subdivided using planes and creating different spaces. Then again, imagining themselves in it and sketching it just like the carved space, showing what is near, what is far, through shading, trying to also show what kind of light quality it will have. And then they had this one very quick one-day exercise again called Dreaming, where they were just given some freedom because all the other design exercise in the subject design, they were very structured. So they had to imagine a place which is fantasy or in their mind and have a story to go with it. I surprisingly found that these actually showcase their personalities too, but that's besides the point. But basically something like science fiction on the model photographs below. It's like a space age thing. And on top, there is something really funky spiral tower-like thing. And then they did, in space exercise, in basic design, they had in this module, principles of organization. So in this exercise, what they had to explore was the manner in which different spaces are organized into integrated wholes. The thing is that when they did the first wall column exercise, they were not organized in a particular way. It was quite random. It was just to create a certain experience, that kind of thing. But here, yes, how do you organize them in a particular way? So how spaces with different qualities and a sense of enclosure can be organized in a certain way, and how the organization can create of these kind of different spaces, create a sense of whole, and how a single principle of organization how it can be expressed in different ways. So we gave them, for example, clustered, and so these are not to scale, but you can see the learnings from the earlier exercises coming. So how they can be distinguished as a group, how they can be identified as a group, what holds them together, or hierarchical. So you can see these examples, and then there are these examples from actual projects which the students got to show what they have done in their models. And then they also had qualities of space. So we are now talking about experiential qualities. So they have already done elements and sense of enclosure, organization, etc. So they were given a selected list of qualities which they had to express through small models, again not to scale, and looking at different qualities of space that have a bearing on how we perceive and experience them. So for example, you have informal, formal. Now all these words were explained to them through non-architectural examples. Like for example, we would say formal, informal. So what would that be? So you'd say, how do you dress when you are going to a cafe, and how would you dress and behave if you were in a interview, for example. So they get an understanding of these words. A lot of them do not come from the English medium, so for them it would be difficult, like introvert, extrovert, for example. And we ask them to identify introvert, their classmates who are introverted and those who are extroverts, so they understand. And then movement and pause. So all these actually models have no function, no context, but there is a certain focus, and they do many models before they actually come to the final one. Then the other module is form and structure. So they explore and study primary forms or forms in nature. This is study of primary forms. For example, they take primary forms and understand them as solids, planes, or edges. And then through a process of transformation in 5 stages, they reveal that nature of how they are looking at the pyramid. So for example, in the top, you have pyramid as a frame and skin, and the transformative actions are pulling, separating, and tilting. And after they have made the model, they actually sketch it out and in color. Again, developing skills of not only model making, but also of using color and watercolor and how to handle that medium. Here is another same pyramid, but as a plane and skin. So here the transformative action is peeling and revealing. So this is one example. Then they take natural objects. So here they are doing the French bean. They study it as a whole, what is its form. Then they cut it crosswise and longwise and see what is inside, see what are the components, how they are related to one another, understanding structure, meaning the relationship of the parts. And once they have done this, I mean, for each of these sections, they do as many as they want. I mean, 50 quick representations in ink, actually, and of which they have just selected the best and pasted them on the chart paper. And then they identify which are the words that describe. So for example, French beans is linear, adjacent, repetition, etc. And these words, then they bring real life examples from magazines, photographs, or they sketch to show that. They also understand how the form has happened, organization or ordering principles, and what is the relationship. And then they also make models to describe. Basically, now it is an abstract thing, you know, so they are trying to, if we may say, the beanness of the bean. That's what they are trying to show you here. And then they did exercises on space and light. They are given a cuboid in which they are supposed to bring in light, direct light and diffuse light. So these are examples of direct light, which they make openings, cut openings in the sides of the cuboid, and then they take it into the sunlight. One side is open, so they can look into it and see what happens. And they turn the cuboid, because of course you can't turn the sun in the short time. So you turn the cuboid and see how, when the direction of the light falling on the opening changes, the patterns that are created within the, or the light quality that is created in the cuboid is different. And these are some examples. I have photographs of how these are for indirect light on the top. And then they actually, for indirect light or diffused light, they sketch the interior using pencil, so they can do shade and shading. And for direct light, where sharp, distinct patterns are created when sharp sunlight comes into cuboid, they do it in ink, which you can see the examples. And this is the full-scale installation that Mayur got students to do in the courtyard, which using newspaper and string, which imitates the dappled light that comes from through the leaves, you know. So this is something that was done. And now building construction, while all this is going on in building construction, they are understanding the basic elements and from a structural point of view, you know. So columns as taking load, and then beams and certain other construction and structural elements. They understand lintels and beams and all Also other construction elements such as parapets, railings, things like that, which of course they don't have in their earlier model. So the first exercise is, this is understanding the three primary structural systems: load bearing, frame, and composite. And they make models to understand how it functions and behaves. You can see all these different examples, and then they understand that if you have this, if you use a very thin paper as a slab, it collapses. So either you have to use a cardboard, or you have to introduce beams, then you have to introduce lintels, etc. And what happens is that the earlier models, the last model which they did in semester, this is in semester 1 only, what the last model which they do in space exercise is brought into the construction class and redone. Now with an understanding of the material, the thickness of the walls, you can see they're showing the slab line, the parapets, the lintel. They add or remove columns as necessary. So from that point of view, they redo it, keeping the essence of the same, but making changes where necessary. So now they have understood that you, for example, you can see the stair, how it is in the earlier model, and then in the here in the lower left, you can see how the staircase was, and now how it is when they have made it actually. Of course, it is all to scale, but now you can see the lintels and slabs and things like that. And then, of course, they make the drawings. So you can see the material is indicated, the thickness is indicated. Making these drawings from the model, even in the first exercises in first semester, is not difficult because they have a grid. So the grid acts as a guide and helps them translate the model into drawing. And then they also did connecting construction and basic design. They had brick as a material in first semester. So they made these little bricks and had some fun trying to create spaces and elements and, exploring brick not in a rigid way, so having some fun. And then finally is technical drawing. So this technical drawing, of course, what is known as solid geometry, actually I call it representation in communication, because that is what they really are. Because these are seen as something that not only help us give shape to ideas, but also tell a story or convey something specific. This is a medium that you can use. And they understood solid geometry straight away, again making models, but they didn't know development of surface, so they make them in clay, and then they are explained how to see it, and then they're sketching how it will look in plan and all the elevations, and then taught how to do it actually in a technical way. But these design models were also taken to this class. And now, for example, here now it is not a technical drawing, but they're trying to show the different degrees of enclosure by shading. So somebody has done in this lower middle, you can see it is done in poster color, creating different shades of gray to show what is most close to most open, or these two using pencil but with different techniques. So this is also how, so now they're understanding that drawings can also be as a means of communicating, because you can see the degree of enclosure in the model, you can sense it, but you can bring that and show it through drawings as well. These are to scale drawings, of course, but now they are shaded, to convey this, add another layer. Otherwise, or they can be brought into the drawing class, and then they are taught how to make these plans, elevation sections in the class. So they are not making plans, elevation sections of some abstract or something, which they have to imagine, like take a cube and tilt it here and tilt it there, and HP and VP and nothing of the sort. They straight away bring their models, including the first model, like this on the upper left, till the last model, which you can see here. It is brought to the class. Here is the last model. And this is the drawing they do in the technical. They also shade it to show the depth and distance, and they understand what is dotted line and whatnot, and showing arrows. They're also understanding how to take plans at different levels. So what will be cut, what will be not cut. It is their own model, you see, they don't have to imagine. So it's right there. So concrete to abstract, and then that is better, and then abstract to concrete is easier. So this is the end of the presentation. I think it is a work in progress. I mean, people may disagree or agree. There can be many points of discussion, which of course, if people want to ask me, can ask. And like I said, there are two elements missing, humanities and ecology environment. But given the chance, I think this can be brought into. I stopped actually doing this for several years because last I did probably was in 11, 12, I think. And I took a step back before I retired and took urban design studio instead, because that's another area of interest. Because I wanted to reflect and figure out how it can be done better if done again. But I have not had the opportunity, but I certainly have ideas. So I might redo some things I have done in a different way, add some things, some more things probably, but very few things. I mean, the emphasis would remain pretty much the same. Some exercises I might not, but that is to be seen. So thank you. I think I'm done.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. If any participants want to ask any questions, the forum is open. So you can unmute yourself or maybe type in the chat box so we can read it on behalf of you.
Sorry for the long presentation. I mean, I hurried through as much as I could. I hope it wasn't too fast.
No, I mean, it was, we were actually wondering why you stopped.
I have to stop. I have edited it. I mean, there were hundreds of slides. I made it half.
Okay.
I just need to do actually the first how I came to this foundation program. The first time I was introduced to this idea, it was not called foundation program. Okay, it was first year teaching when I went to the US in '92, and I was teaching at Rensselaer Polytechnic. And they have something, they don't call it a foundation program, but one thing I learned is that they don't have these separate subject heads. They don't have these silos. So they have so when I looked at the program, I found 10 teachers. I said, so many, but that is, all teachers are teaching everything. You understand? And each time there is no separate subject. All are doing everything, only sometimes the emphasis is different. And that is something I learned. And then I got an opportunity when I went to Goa for a year on Lien from MSU, where I was entrusted to develop a foundation program, actually because it became a faculty and there were other design disciplines which they were going to add, which they didn't. But then I ended up making a foundation program for architecture. So this was in 2004-05, and then when I came back to the US, to MSU, in 5-6, I actually started this in earnest. That's what, that is how it has evolved. So in all these places, in Goa and here, it's not written as a foundation program from scratch. It was kind of fitted into the existing framework and curriculum. So in MSU also, because there is a separate exam for technical subject, there is a separate marking, separate everything. But yet I think I was able to connect them to the best of my ability, I think. Of course, I mean, it can be done better, but to bring everybody on board is very difficult. People have their territories. Nobody wants to give it up. It's very feudal.
Yes. I can see a few appreciation messages from the faculties and the outside faculties, which are Avni ma'am saying, recall as a co-faculty done very interesting exercises, nice presentation. One by Saurabh Chaudhary is saying wonderful presentation. Silpi ma'am also sharing very enriching presentation as always. Rajesh Agarwal sir saying, it is a great privilege to hear you ma'am. Truly inspiring and eye-opener session. Praveen presentation was very good. Thank you. And Pallavi Mandlamam is saying it was really nice connect with the original thought of School of Architecture.
I just wanted to say something.
Yes,
You know
ma'am.
what I find, I haven't been to every college in India, impossible, and I don't have an idea what every college in India does. But one of the places where the maximum impact of this Bauhaus pedagogy is in the subject called basic design. Actually, I don't know from where this word has come. Probably, I was discussing with Jaimini, and he said it could be probably from SEPT when when they shifted from the 6-year program to the 5-year program. When I joined in '72, it was a 6-year program, and we had nothing called basic design. We had workshop again from Bauhaus, and we had drawing and painting, which is again based on the Bauhaus model. Uh, in MSU also, they didn't have anything called basic design. They had only drawing, which Pingle sir used to take. But when I joined MSU, there was this subject basic design, and I hadn't studied it, and I had absolutely no clue how to teach it. And it was a good thing because it was a blank slate, and I just redefined it completely. Because what I see in other colleges is this whole thing, the key word here is composition. If you look at the NID syllabus also, the foundation program, there also they have this composition as actually a subject, So composition of lines, composition of dots and lines, composition of cubes. But why do you want to compose this? For what purpose? I mean, I think we really need to move away. Some may even say that basic design is a redundant subject, but I think if it is redefined, you can have it, or else it can actually merge with design. And all these compositions don't take you anywhere. So you do line, plane, this, that, and then you give it a 3D. That's not what architecture is. Architecture is 3D. You only make a drawing because you need to communicate something, but you have to imagine it in 3D. You don't make a plan and then give it some heights, When do you see a wall as a line? When? I mean, where is the experiential aspect? Which is what architecture is all about, So I find almost all colleges that I have seen so far is this line, point, plane, volume, make a composition of this and make a composition of that. I never use the word composition in any of my exercises ever. It's an absolute no word.
Ma'am, one of our faculties, Vignya ma'am, was a part of this exercise. She has written it in the chat box.
Oh, good. Yes, I'm sure. She was my student. Absolutely.
I think
One question from the sorry, yes.
Vignya, you can unmute and ask also.
We can ask Vignya, did she enjoy it? She can tell us frankly.
There are many students over
ma'am.
here.
Yes, madam, I really enjoyed. I could really relate myself to those exercises which we did it in the first year.
Yeah.
2004 to 98, madam. 99 we did this, madam.
No, not really exactly like
yes,
this.
I will make it. मैडम हमको है ना DN हॉल के आसपास हैंगआउट स्पेस करनी थी उससे पहले की एक्सरसाइज वो जो हॉरिजॉन्टल वर्टिकल ओपनिंग्स 3 सेंटीमीटर
बराबर but उसमें the only thing is at that point I had not integrated all the subjects. That was the thing.
Even sketching, even we drew elevation section, that those things you showed, no, sketching through shades, we did that also, man.
Yeah. But integration actually began from 2005-06 where because I insisted that I need at least 2 subjects in first year so that I can do this integration properly. They were of course not allowing me to teach all the subjects because then they thought I will just run the show and be the boss, which nobody likes. So.
But I remember, madam, I was fortunate to be a part of your subject. I think construction हम लोग ने इस तरीके से साथ में लिया.
हमने लिया है ना? Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely, we have taught construction. You remember they made those models?
Yeah. आपने पेपर रखा, then we put that cargo, make the models.
Yes, फिर बीम कहाँ आता है, बीम रखते तो क्या होता है वो सब. हाँ, बराबर है.
2011-12 के आसपास.
Correct. Yes. I remember.
Ma'am, I was your student at Navrachna University, first batch. You did almost exercises.
No. You didn't do anything about walls and nothing of the sort.
Ma'am, we did City Walk, then we did
City walk. Yes.
Hitler, the great Hitler movie poster.
You did
Then,
that. Yes, yes.
carving in POP.
Yes.
Then
Some
light,
things, yes, but not all. Yes, true.
light exercise.
Yeah. Some things, yes, light exercise, some things. But
Abstraction. Yeah.
oh, by the way, but all these exercise, everybody has not done. This is at different times in different ways. I mean, but yes, they do slog a lot in first year, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, she will remember. Yeah, they really worked hard, but it is fun.
Yes, ma'am. It was really fun. Then we did space vocabulary, form transformation, many,
Huh.
many,
Many,
many.
slightly differently. Yeah,
Yeah.
slightly differently.
There were
True.
also Percy sir and Gurudev sir.
Yeah.
All three were there.
Yes.
Madam,
Ma'am,
they are
that is a
privileged to have Rachana as our faculty now.
Yes, yes. That shows how far, and I'm getting old. That just shows. But I'm
We all are
still a young thinking person, ready to think new things, question. We have rejected many modernist ideas. I mean, people have criticized modern architecture. So much is written about it. But yet our education system, our pedagogy hasn't changed to
True.
keep up with the times. So how people think and what people actually do in practice, and I mean, is it really important that you do a composition showing harmony? Should we really have harmony? I mean, should things always be in balance? Should there always be unity and purity? Can there be complexity? Can there be contradiction? I mean, these are the questions that you're supposed to ask. But certainly,
Ma'am,
yes.
there's a question in the chat box.
Okay.
In the present scenario, when students and teachers are not in class, how to take up basic design or other subjects? That is the first part. And the second part is now, since computers are the only mode to teach, will softwares play an important role? Can AutoCAD be introduced on the first day?
Actually, I will ask the first question. See, I did not purposely orient this whole thing of how to teach in COVID times. For the simple reason, I don't think COVID is going to be here forever. I hope not, at least. I mean, we all hope, right? So this is a temporary thing, and you have to make those adjustments in the best possible manner. You can't rewrite the curriculum for COVID. You can't change your entire pedagogy for COVID, because that is not how things are. I mean, are you going to stop meeting your friends for the rest of your life? Of course not. Are you going to wear mask till the day you die? Of course not. You will go to restaurants, and you will go here and there, and you will travel to foreign countries and do all the things you want to do, because they add meaning and value to your life. So you are not going to change everything completely. I think you're only making adjustments. So I think that is the way to go forward. And what was the second part of the question?
Yes, ma'am. Now, since computers are the only mode to
Yes. When I was actually at RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic, they had the same exercises. They had them do them in computers as well. So it is not a situation of or. If I work on computers, then I don't work with pencil. If there is TV, then there is no newspaper. That is not how it is. So it's a question. It is and. So you can have computers. How you employ, how do you use that medium, to what end? That is important. Per se, computer is not good or bad. See, it is. Everything has a purpose. So if the way you use it in an exercise, if it adds value, if it allows you to do things which you otherwise would not be able to, then it surely has a place. So in 92, actually, students were doing these kind of exercises on the computer as well. But they were doing it by hand as well, through models. It's not either or, it's and. This and this.
Ma'am, there is another question by Shilpi ma'am. Shall RSP also be included in the foundation course?
Uh, RSP, because I told you an existing curriculum I'm following, right? I'm not rewriting the entire curriculum. I've never had the opportunity to do that and write the foundation program afresh. So we didn't have RSP, and we still don't have RSP at MSU, but we had it in Goa. So we certainly, so this is how, so the first year students, now I'll tell you, it was integrated. So we took the students to Badami and we did measure drawing, and there we related to what we were doing in the studio as to how these elements are actually used to create these experiential places, but it has something to do with the culture, with the lifestyle, with the material that is available there, with the technology that is there, with tradition, the different names in the local language that different spaces have and elements have. Do you follow? So we certainly linked it. For example, in Badami, they have the house, because it's a very dry region and it doesn't have much rainfall. So in the kitchen, they actually have a small hole, which brings in light. They call it Berkandi. And that is amazing light that comes in. And automatically, immediately, we linked it to their cuboid exercise of light. You follow? We said, oh, look, you did that exercise, and then this is how the light was coming, and see how it is actually put in practice here, but it is for different reasons, for the smoke to go away and to bring in light. And it doesn't have any windows, so this is how it can happen. So how changes in, for example, in the entrance of the houses at Badami, as you enter in the mid, there are two raised platforms on either side, and they are defined by a row of columns. Okay. So immediately we said, look how this continuous space has been defined in 3 different parts by putting these column elements and changing the plinth the way you did it in your models. And now there is a functional reason. So here on one side, the animals, the hay and everything is stored. On the opposite side, actually, it is a raised platform for guests and visitors to sit. So yes, certainly. I mean, linking it to real life situations is very, very essential. You can't do it out of context, in a very abstract way. Yes, there can be color exercises also, which I get them to do, but I have not put it here. It was just becoming too much. So, but certainly there is RSP. Wherever you have RSP, you must go into real life situations. See, this is what I'm saying. Going to the RSP or doing this or not doing that, that's not the issue. The issue is what is being said, what is being pointed out, what is being discussed, what are the questions that are being asked. That is important. I mean, you may go to RSP and not do this at all. No, don't link it. Don't say it. Don't point out. Then that's how it is. Or else you go to RSP and make that effort. The teacher has a role to play.
Yes.
Or ask them questions. Do you see any link? Don't tell them the answer. Do you see anything between what you did before and what you're seeing now? Ask them many questions. Questions is the best method. Questioning, thinking, reflecting.
It was a very insightful session, ma'am. You packed a lot of knowledge in limited time.
Yeah, it was.
I would request our Professor Taha Padrawala to deliver the formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Pranjali. Myself, Taha Padrawala, Assistant Professor at College of Architecture, finally would like to take this opportunity to place on record our heartiest thanks and gratitude to Punita ma'am for sharing importance of different exercises in foundation course and give the brilliant message, let their students learn.
Yes.
I thank her for taking her time for us from her schedule for this beautiful webinar. I cannot thank everyone enough for their involvement and their willingness to join our webinar series and motivate us to keep moving forward. Webinar series like this scale cannot happen overnight. The wheels rolling start from the weeks ago. It requires planning and bird's eyes of detail. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by our principal Sailesh Nayak and a team of very motivated, dedicated colleagues of College of Architecture who know their job and they are result oriented. I also would like to thank from bottom of my heart our chairman of NEST, Sri Bhaskarbhai Patel, our management team, administration team for extending all the support. Finally, the wonderful students who have been turned up in such great numbers, not only from our college, but also from other colleges too. Thank you so much for your cooperation. I would like to inform all the participants about our fourth webinar of our Essence of Architecture series on Essence of Childhood in Architecture for Child Development and Learning Transforming Anganwadis and Schools through Building as a Learning Aid, BALA, by Dr. Preeti Vajpayee and architect Kabir Vajpayee on 4th September 2020. Also, do all follow us on our Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube pages for upcoming webinars. Thank you.
Thank you, Sailesh and
Thank you,
Taha
madam.
and all others involved.
Yeah,
My pleasure also. Thanks very much for allowing me to postpone the presentation. We really had a lot of serious problems at home, which we were trying to deal with.
okay,
Fortunately, all the problems have been solved, but thanks for
okay.
that.
Yeah, thank you,
So only
madam.
Prof.